Welcome to Pacific Mammal Research's Marine Mammal Highlight Series. We are a 501c3 research and education nonprofit studying marine mammals in the Salish Sea off Washington State. In this series, you will learn about different marine mammals as we discuss interesting facts about each species. This is our way to geek out, share some information, and have some fun. We hope you enjoy the series, and be sure to follow us on Instagram to vote for which animal we talk about next. And without further ado, welcome to the PacMam podcast. I'm Cindy.
And I'm Kat.
And this week was a Marine Mammal highlight. And thank you for our little hiatus as we were off doing summary things. But we're back, and we are starting off this week with one you guys got to choose. And it was pretty much a landslide. Yeah, it was like 85%. And I do want to say I kind of called it. I told Kat, I was like, pretty sure the pygmy killer whale is going to win, because it like pygmy killer whale, like who doesn't want to know?
Right. Everyone's like, wait, what? That exists? Tell me more.
And then the other one was the common dolphin. So we have like really rare one, and then like, I mean, even though we actually don't know as much about common dolphins as you would think by the name common, but like, this is a common dolphin, whatever.
They are really cool. So next time we have the common dolphin in the poll, I'm just letting you know in advance. They are really interesting, but we are excited to talk about the pygmy killer whale today.
Yes. So, and we had done the one that we had done before was a pygmy sperm whale. So now we're doing a pygmy killer whale. And we'll talk about lots of different things about this kind of cool species. But I think it's funny because it's like a false killer whale. It doesn't look like a killer whale either. And pygmy killer whale looks more like a false killer whale or a pilot whale or whatever, which we'll describe and how hard they are to ID in the wild. But I found this one quote, and I loved it. So I thought I was going to start off with this before Kat gets into what they look like. This is seldomly seen in the wild. The mysterious and naturally rare pygmy killer whales closely guard their secrets of the deep.
Ooh,
right?
Fun.
I was like, ooh, they're actively closely guarding their secrets rather than just being hard to find. Like, ooh, that's very intriguing.
I think this is like one of the definitions of when we call a species enigmatic. This is sort of a good definition of that type of species, because we know quite a bit, but also we don't know a lot, which is really cool.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're actively closely guarding their secrets of the deep. So
apparently, how fun.
Really well. Yeah. So with that, I will let you get on with what they look like and why they're so confusing with other animals.
Yeah, so we're going to start off a little different with this slightly enigmatic episode. I feel like we're going to be doing things a little differently on this one. So we're going to start off with a little bit of history, just because this will give us context for their current distribution and why we're going to be talking about some of the things that we're talking about. So these guys were first discovered actually from their skulls. So there were two skulls. One was described in 1827. And the other one was described in 1874, both by a gentleman named J. Gray. J is in the letter J. I'm not quite sure what his name was. And he was the one who gave them the Latin name Ferrisa attenuata. So attenuata is specifically referencing the thinning. It means thinning. So it's in reference to their slender bodies that basically from the head, they kind of taper back down toward the dorsal fin.
So that's why Stenella attenuata is also
named exactly. So after those first two skulls were found, and they're like, okay, we have a new species, let's go ahead and give it a Latin name. Basically, nobody found any other evidence of this species until 1952, which is like 100 years later, basically, which is wild. And this was a live individual that was harpooned off of Japan and was brought in for processing. This was part of a fishery. And they were able to, from that individual, they were able to recreate and describe the external appearance of the animal. And I believe they were able to keep the skeleton itself. So that was like the first full body evidence that this even existed. And the common name of pygmy killer whale was proposed in 1954. And there were a handful of sightings of pygmy killer whales in the wild between this sort of mid-1950s and late 1960s. And I'm going to pass off to Cindy, who's going to give us a little bit more information about what some of those sightings or instances of engagement were with those species.
Yeah, so it's interesting, mainly just because of what was happening to them in when these were described. So the first one obviously was harpoon. That's not great.
Mhm.
The second time it was documented in the wild off of Senegal in 1958. It was the individual was captured and killed. The third at sea sighting was a group of 14 individuals off Japan in 1963, and in this case, the entire group was captured, taken into captivity, where they all died within 22 days. The fourth recorded at sea sighting was in 1963, ended a bit better when only one individual in the group was captured and taken into captivity. So the rest of them survived, so that's good. This time that was in Hawaii. And then the fifth record of a live animal was an individual captured and accidentally killed in tuna Persine off Costa Rica in 1967. And then in the spring of 1969, there was an individual that was harpooned off St. Vincent. And then finally, in 1969, a group was observed in the Indian Ocean with none of them being killed or captured.
I know, finally.
Finally, they can just be looked at instead of being grabbed at. So I think that was important just to see, like, okay, we don't know much about these animals for a very long time, and then each time we find them, we kill them. And then we're certainly not going to learn that much more if we keep doing that. So it's taken us a while for this species in particular to be able to observe.
For sure. And let's now move into the normal format of distribution and appearance. I wanted to give that background because I think it's really not only do we, did you touch on some of the places where they are seen, but also to just give you a sense of how challenging it is to actually find these guys, where they literally, there was no sightings of them for like that we knew for like 100 years. Like that's wild.
Well, and even the two skulls was 50 years apart.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Exactly. It's amazing. So let's talk about why. So these guys have a circumpolar range, ranging from about 40 degrees north to 35 degrees south. So it's kind of that sort of middle band-ish. They do prefer warmer tropical and subtropical areas, and they like deep water. So they are typically found in those deeper water areas and or by oceanic islands that have deep shelves, like continental shelf areas and things like that. Hence why they are found in common Hawaii. Yep. And I actually found one reference that said that they accounted for less than 1% of odontocete sightings in the world.
Oh, and I have one for the Baird research that in Hawaii, that theirs was 1.7% of the cetacean sightings that they have in Hawaii. So yeah.
Yeah. So this is like it's very rare to actually see these guys. So again, like they have a really wide range of distribution, but they're very patchy within that range. Yeah. And it's actually very uncommon to actually see them. So like Cindy already mentioned a few of the places that they have been found, but most commonly they are found and observed near the Hawaiian Islands, like we already said, in the Gulf of Mexico, near Japan, the Indian Ocean, and in tropical West Africa. I did also find a couple of reports of strandings of pygmy killer whales in Australian waters, and that would be specifically in New South Wales and Western Australia, so like on the western coast of Australia. I thought you were going to say something. So a lot of the information that we have and that we're going to be sharing really does come from these Hawaiian animals, because they are a lot easier to study. Like we said, they much prefer this deeper water area, and that's really hard to study animals out in the open ocean in deep water. So the benefit of the fact that they like Hawaii is that that's much easier to pop out on a boat in Hawaii and actually survey these animals, or hopefully see them. And it's really interesting, especially given what we do here at PacMam. A lot of what we know about these animals is thanks to a long-term photo ID project. So that was started by Dan McSweeney of the Wild Whale Research Foundation, and they combined their efforts with Cascadia Research Collective in 2000 to combine their photo ID catalogs. And I'm sure Cindy will talk a little bit more about what we've learned from some of those, but I just wanted to kind of like highlight that up front, that like a lot of the information we're going to be talking about is either from dead, stranded, or bicaught animals or from this long-term study in Hawaii.
Yeah, anything live behavior that we're talking about is basically from Hawaii, and everything else is stranded individuals, possible one-off sightings, but yeah, that is correct.
Yeah. So what do they look like? These guys are, like Cindy said, they're very, very often confused with false killer whales or melon-headed whales, not just because they look similar, but also because they overlap in range with both of those species. So it's a little bit tricky to know which one you're seeing if you just have a quick sighting.
Even for like people who are out there doing this research all the time.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
and be
Yeah.
like, no, let's look at these pictures and collaborate with colleagues and be like, is this what you?
Hmm. Yeah. So these guys range in weight from about 240 to 490 pounds. So pretty big range in weight. I think they average somewhere around the 300 to 350 pound mark. They typically grow up to about 6.5 to 7.5 feet. So they're a fairly like standard dolphin size.
Yeah.
Um, Again, this is one of those confusing situations where they are in fact a dolphin species. They are, I know they have whale in their common name, but they are in fact a dolphin. So these guys have a dark gray body, like very dark gray, kind of almost a charcoaly color. They are short and relatively stout in terms of their build. And they have in terms of coloration, they have a narrow cape that kind of dips below the dorsal fin and a light gray ventral band. So again, there is some slight kind of color shading on the dorsal side. The underbellies are much lighter than the top side.
Yeah,
Um,
I heard that I saw in one of the things I was reading through that the cape was actually one of the reasons why it helped them to identify that it was a pygmy killer whale versus one of the other ones because that cape is a bit more distinctive than others.
yeah, yeah, exactly. They do have a blunt head with no distinct beak. So again, very similar to false killer whales or melon-headed whales, both of which kind of have a similar head shape. What's called an underslung jaw. So if you think about kind of like a sperm whale jaw, where it's like the jaw is like underneath, kind of like this if you're watching on YouTube.
Yeah,
um,
little underbite kind of thing where it's like
yeah, it's just the mouth is like positioned at the very base of the head versus like kind of 3/4 of the way down the head.
mhm.
Um, and they have distinct whitish lips. So that is again another distinctive identifier of the pygmy killer whales.
It's like they put white lipstick on.
It
It's
really does. Yeah, when I said that and I was looking at pictures, I'm like, oh, they weren't kidding. Like it's actually really looks like they're wearing lipstick. And then the other thing that you can use to identify these guys specifically is the dorsal fin. So it is very high off the back. So it's a big, tall dorsal fin for their size. Um, every single resource I said that it lacks rigidity, which I think is really interesting. And I'm not 100% sure what they mean by that. If it's prone to bending over, not actually sure.
hmm.
But that was really interesting, and I've never seen that in the description of a cetacean.
Yeah, lacks
Yeah.
rigid.
Yeah. So like I said, I don't know if it's potentially prone to tipping a little bit, not sure.
But then you would think you'd see more stuff. Like I didn't see anything about that in any of the stuff that I was reading or in pictures or something. Like, how would you know that it has less rigidity unless you see them falling over all the time? And then why wouldn't that be out in pictures and everything?
Yeah. And like every description of their appearance said it in there. It was really interesting. Um, so the dorsal fin is very tall. It points slightly backwards and has a little bit more of a triangular shape than other species in the area. So that is a really good way to identify that you're seeing a pygmy killer whale versus one of these other species.
So the other ones would be
Also, if
a bit more falcate instead of
I
triangle.
believe so. Yeah, yeah, and especially things like the false killer whale and pilot whales and melon-headed whales, they all have pretty curved dorsal
Yeah,
fin.
like
Yeah,
like roundy.
yeah. Some of them like extremely falcate as well. So I think that's one of the biggest differences with these guys. The dorsal fin shape is going to be a telltale.
Mhm.
Um, if you do happen to see their jaw, I thought this was really cool. Their left jaw is larger than their right jaw, which is fascinating. Yeah, yeah. So the left side is bigger and usually has more teeth than the right side.
What? Why?
Isn't that cool?
Why?
So my theory, I didn't see anything as to why. I'm not sure if they actually know, but my theory would be a lot of animals, as we know, are sighted in terms
Yeah.
of the way that they catch prey. So I don't know, maybe there's something to do with that or something to do with their behavior, like their conspecific behavior that might
Mhm.
lean toward that, but
We have
super
we
interesting.
know very little about what they eat, so
Oh, okay. Okay. So we're not gonna get any answers.
yeah,
Spoilers.
no, we're not getting answers at all. 'Cause I'm trying to think, like, I don't, maybe, but I mean, maybe they do something specific, like you see the the dolphins that bottlenose dolphins that strand themselves, and beach themselves and get the mullet and stuff. They're always doing it on one side, so their teeth are one
Right,
end.
right.
So you can see something like that, but these guys are oceanic, so like they're
Right. I don't know
not
if it was like
animals.
maybe like catching things in such a way.
Yeah.
I don't know. but it is
You're
fascinating to
working
me.
out one side of your one arm too much, the other one's not as much.
Right. If anybody's seen, what is that movie? If anyone's seen Lady in the Water, there's a character in there who only works out one side of his body. Anyway, fascinating. So there's typically 8 to 11 pairs of teeth in the upper jaw, 11 to 13 pairs of teeth in the lower jaw. And like I said, the higher number is on the left side versus the right. Really interesting.
That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that is where they live and what they look like. Again, they're actually a really, really cool looking species. Like I said, very similar looking in a lot of ways to those false killer whales or melon-headed whales. But I think especially if you're a trained observer and you know what you're looking for, some of those things would definitely cause you to be like, wait a second, I think we might have an incredibly rare sighting of a pygmy killer
If
whale,
they could
which would be
just stick
so cool.
their heads out of the water, you could see their little white lips.
I know. That'd be great.
Yeah, but I know, can you imagine being on the boat and being like, oh my gosh, we just saw a pygmy killer whale.
Yeah. We got to see the 1% that you get to see.
Yeah, super rare. Crazy.
Yeah, really neat.
All right, well, then I'll go into their diet and behavior. The diet's real short, right? So they eat squid and fish. That's pretty much what we know.
Cool.
Yeah, there was one paper that I thought about putting in the new research, but it basically just said like 2 species of fish that accounted for most of their diet, but that was that specific place, and it's like, okay, well they eat fish and squid. But all of that's from stranded individuals and stranded stomachs, that kind of thing. Really interesting is that there is limited behavior data that suggests they may prey on Stenella species and common dolphins as well.
What?
Right? And now
no, really?
Size, I was like, oh yeah, like false killer whales and like that, you'll see them do that, whatever. But these guys are so small; they're the same size as the dolphin.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, they'd be like the same size. Yeah.
Yeah. But so they have been seen to take dolphins when escaping from the tuna nets in eastern tropical Pacific Ocean. Wow. But not documented in other parts of their range. So perhaps it's only there and only because of the tuna fisheries, like that they're going after those because they're more easily caught because they're fleeing from the nets or whatever.
So I wonder, so the gentleman who proposed the common name of pygmy killer whale was from Japan. Yeah. I wonder if they observe this behavior.
Possibly.
And that's why they related to killer whales, because they're the only other ones that they know would eat other mammals. Ooh, fascinating.
Possibly. Yeah.
I don't know. Don't quote me on that, because I have this is a cat postulation of like maybe wouldn't that be interesting?
Anything that we go into more thought on, this is strictly just our ideas of what it could be. It's
not
based on any
we don't actually know. Yeah.
We don't have any concrete evidence for it.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yes, because I didn't think much of it until you said the size, and I was like, oh yeah, wait a minute.
Yeah, no, they're small for trying to take on something their own size. That's really interesting.
So interesting. And then in Hawaii, it looks like they feed mostly at night, and that's all we got about diet.
Okay.
Don't see what they do. Don't know them. We don't see them. So there you go. Behavior, I have a little bit more information, mainly because of Hawaii. But generally for the range, they're seen in groups of 12 to 50, and lots of times I'd say 30 or 40. I think that's pretty common. But they can be seen in a couple hundred, groups of a couple hundred. So possibly if they all getting together to have a party. So there was a comment that says both sexes may remain in birth groups their whole lives. I have no idea really where that comes from, other than maybe what they've learned in Hawaii, showing that there are long-term associations. And I'm sure they probably do have sexes on some of those individuals. So it's possible that they both remain, and that would be very interesting because that is a unique thing in the mammal world for males and females to stay within the birth group, and that is something that happens with killer whales in some of the populations of killer whales.
And I think one of the things that is more common amongst what is known as the blackfish group in general, so that includes things like pilot whales, false killer whales, melon-headed whales, pygmy killer whales as well. Yeah,
the social structure seems to be very strong in all of those groups. There's tight groups that they do have, so it would make sense. So as you said, they're rarely close to shore unless around those oceanic islands, which is why Hawaii is such a great place to observe them. They're generally less active than other oceanic dolphin species, and they are often seen logging, which I thought was really interesting. They'll just like sit at the
Hang out.
surface, just hang out.
Yeah.
They also, so then another reference said they're described as quick and lively. I was like, but you just said they're lazy and they log all the time. Okay, so they're quick and lively, often wary of boats, and tend to bunch together when disturbed. So again, that also kind of goes with the stronger associations and group behavior of sticking together, right? If you know everybody. They will occasionally bow ride, tail slap, or spy hop, but really, again, not that often. It's kind of similar to our harbor porpoises, right? They don't really do it that much, but occasionally they do. Really funny is that, I guess not funny, but interesting is that multiple references said they get very aggressive when they're in captivity. So for the few times that they brought them into captivity, yeah, apparently they do not like it and they are unhappy and very angry.
Interesting. Wow. Okay.
Which is different than most other dolphin species. Even if they don't survive well, they're not described as being aggressive. It's just that they don't do well in captivity and they die for various reasons. But
Right. I feel like in fairness, yeah, the only other one I've ever heard distinctly described as being potentially aggressive are some male killer whales in captivity who would just like repeatedly ram or like, again, yeah, it's not common though. That's interesting.
Especially for a smaller species.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to move into the stuff with Hawaii. This is the McSweeney and then also Robin Baird as part of the Cascadia Research Collective, who's been doing that since about 2000. They combine their sightings, as Kat had said. And this is basically the only one that's been well studied. This is the first evidence of a resident population anywhere in the world. So these ones in Hawaii. They have had sightings since 1985. So I think the McSweeney started many, many years before, and then Cascadia started as they did more research down there. But so think of this again. So from 1985 to now is how many years? We got like 40?
Basically 40 years, yeah.
Yeah. They've had 63 encounters.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like 1.5 a year, basically. 6 satellite tag deployments, and then research and community scientists and other researchers have given photographs and stuff, so more opportunistic things. They have 800 unique individuals. And one HIFA 373 has been seen 63 times since 2008 to 2020.
Wow.
So yeah. So they've been doing this a long time. Again, one encounter a year. I mean, oh my God, that's just that's crazy.
So interesting.
Yeah, so they have resident groups off of Kona and Oahu, and they likely stay within 20 miles from shore. So again, that goes back to what Kat said about those closer to the oceanic edge, where the drop off is quicker. And if they stay within 20 miles, that's much easier distance for people to get out to go see them than if they're like 100 miles offshore. So they've done some satellite. Wow, satellite. I like satellite though. That's fun.
That's fun.
Satellite telemetry is how they've gotten that data of some of the tags that they put on. So the 22-year study off the Hawaiian Islands showed them to be year-round and in stable social groups because over 80% have been resighted and 92% of them have been linked to a single social network.
Wow. That's incredible. Yeah.
Everybody just hanging out together. No, you cannot come in here and bark. Thank you so much. My dog.
Got something to say.
Yeah, exactly. And he pushed open the door to get in here so he could bark. And they often see the same individuals in the same group. So that's where they're going with these associations seem to be very stable and long term. There may be some movement between islands. And then again, but these sightings are rare, with only them being 1.7% of the encounters there. So that's basically what we have. There was a little bit about, I found some information from Australia. They basically have said we don't know anything about them because they're not well studied here. But there was off Sri Lanka, there's gillnet bycatch, and they show that they are present most months. So they're likely year-round residents. And in St. Vincent and the Lesser Antilles also indicate encounters year-round. So there does seem to be some there. And then only off the coast of Wollongong, NSW, do you know what NSW is?
That's New South Wales.
Oh, excellent. I was hoping you knew because I was like, it didn't tell me and I don't know what it is. They report that they're only seen in August through February, so there it might be seasonal. So it seems like there are a lot of places that it is year-round long-term stuff, but again, every population could be slightly different.
Cool.
And the last thing I have is reproduction, and we don't know.
I was gonna say, let me guess.
Literally nothing. Unknown to that, we don't know. They had the size when they reached sexual and physical maturity, but not a correlation with age. So I didn't feel it really necessary to explain what size they get. It doesn't really matter. And so we don't know. I saw one that said they were at least over 14 years old. I'm like, well, okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, but yes, other than that, we know nothing about the reproduction.
Makes sense.
Yep. So with that, we're going to take a quick break, and I'm going to kick my dog out of the thing and hopefully stop barking. So we'll be right back in just a few minutes. All right, we're back. So, Kat, let's talk about their status and bad things.
Yes. Always love to talk about that part. So yeah, so these guys, in terms of their status, they are currently listed by the IUCN as a species of least concern, which I think is very interesting. And yeah, and I double checked this. I know. So I double checked this because a couple of references that I was looking at said one said data deficient, one said least concern. So I went to the IUCN website. No, they are listed as a species of least concern. So from what that means is that their populations, as far as we know, are just fine. They're not severely in under threat or in decline. But again, it's virtually impossible to have an accurate global count or population estimate for these guys because we see them so infrequently. We really don't know. With that being said, we do have some rough estimates from NOAA stock assessments. So these are typically conducted by NOAA in the US waters, at least through aerial surveys. So the stock assessment that I saw for 2000, I believe it was 2020, I think. The Hawaiian stock, so like all of the Hawaiian Islands, are estimated at around about 10,000 animals. It was like a minimum of 5,000 and something, maximum of 10,000-ish. So somewhere in there. For the Hawaiian stock, another estimate I found on a different website estimated approximately 38,900 in the tropical Pacific waters, and very specifically 408 in the Gulf of Mexico.
Okay.
So again, I don't know where those numbers came from. Really, we don't know in terms of population numbers, in terms of, are these guys doing well or not doing well? We don't know. Apparently, according to the IUCN, they're fine enough. But I do think it's very interesting that I'm wondering if it's partly because of the information that they're getting from Hawaii now, like a little more consistently, that they're saying least concern versus data deficient as we learn more about those populations. But that's one tiny subset of a global population. So
I'll say, like, that's one little thing. You can't say everybody's fine because this one little pot over here is.
Yeah. So that was interesting to me. I was surprised to see that, given how infrequently we see them. So we've already kind of mentioned a few of the different threats that these guys face, but let's go into them in a little bit more detail. So entanglement is a significant one. So again, referencing Cascadia Research Collective work in Hawaii, they did an examination of Hawaiian pygmy killer whales recently using underwater footage, and they were specifically looking at their mouths and their mouth lines. So like the lines of their mouth as you're looking at them. And they found that 62% of individuals had evidence of injuries that stemmed from anthropogenic sources. And about 49% of those appeared to be consistent with fishery interactions. So basically what that means is about half the animals that they saw seem to have some evidence of having a negative interaction with fisheries around the mouth area. So what that would kind of indicate is that they're probably going after the same food. as the fishermen, and so are getting caught up in those lines as they're trying to go after prey. Again, these were live animals, so that's encouraging. Those animals were able to escape, but that does indicate that entanglement is likely a much more dramatic threat to these guys than we actually know or realize.
Yeah. I had that as one of my new researches, but fine. I won't talk about it. You could do that. Fine.
It was relevant.
It's totally relevant. But I would like to add to that, in that they also showed that only 29% of those anthropogenic injuries are visible from the surface. So how important it was to get underwater video to be able to see, again, the mouth, they're not sticking their face out of the thing and you can see their mouths. And then just the emphasis of a lot of that footage is from community scientists. So the ability to be able to get really interesting and good data from community scientists and just people that are out on the water. And then on top of that, it being underwater video. If you can put your GoPro, like stick your GoPro in and get video.
Yeah.
It's really helpful.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. And yeah, thank you for pointing that out, because that is a really important point. This is not something that you can necessarily just observe from the surface when you happen to be out on a boat and seeing them cresting the waves somewhere. So it just adds another layer to the difficulty of researching these guys a little bit and actually getting meaningful data. But I mean, that's fantastic that they're actually doing it and able to use some of these more novel methods to do so, which is really exciting.
We see that, one of our animals here, we've used markings on the top of her body, raindrop, and that are easily identifiable, but she surfaced a little bit higher. We're like, whoa, she's got a giant gash that goes at the bottom. We didn't know about that. I don't know when it happened because we didn't always put her belly above the water. So there's lots of they're hiding in there. They're hiding the secrets of the deep in there.
Right. I was going to say, see, it comes back around.
Right.
Okay, so another threat that these guys are facing is hunting. So intentional killing for subsistence harvest in Japan and Sri Lanka still occurs, either through dry fisheries or drift net fisheries. So both are used. In Sri Lanka specifically, pygmy killer whales and other dolphin species are intentionally harpooned and used for bait for the longline fishery, for sharks and other oceanic fishing industries. So they are susceptible to that as well around the world. Different parts of Indonesia still also continue to use that sort of intentional killing. Ocean noise is another big one. This was kind of flagged up specifically around the Hawaiian area and the Hawaiian archipelago. This is a really common area for naval sonar, and naval sonar testing is regularly conducted around the Hawaiian Islands. So again, because we see these guys so infrequently, it's really difficult to know whether these tests or the frequency of sonar testing is negatively impacting them. However, we know from other species that it usually has a negative correlation with at least behavior, as far as we know, that it can encourage the animals to flee areas. It can cause sort of like changes in behavioral state and things like that. So as well as potentially even damage to hearing. So that is something that we know where they're exposed to. We don't really know from like a quantifiable level how much that impacts them, but we know they're exposed to that.
And I actually have a really interesting new research concerning some individuals and some possible acoustic issues. So.
Okay, perfect. So put a pin in that. And then, yeah, finally, I just have one more. So like other species of pretty much everything that lives in the marine environment, but particularly these large mammals, there is evidence of pollutants that has shown up in pygmy killer whales, including hydrocarbons like DDT and PCBs. So again, these are ones that take a long, long time to exit the environment, basically. And for any of these larger mammals, these things also biomagnify up the food chain and bioaccumulate up the food chain. So they're eating animals that have low levels of these things. And then also, again, just when they're then having to metabolize their fat stores, they get dosed with chemicals that are stored in their fat. So not great.
And again, these are not ones that are generally close to shore. So these pollutants are reaching out into the middle of the ocean and getting to these guys. So
yeah,
it shows the far-reaching effects.
Yeah, and a lot of those are really coming through their food sources as well. A lot of it's coming from what they're eating. Yeah, so not ideal.
Well, I mean, I guess it's really good they're naturally rare. So even with all, at least the direct interactions, it's less likely to have a large impact on their population because they just don't see them that much. But
Yeah.
that only matters if that only counts if the population's really good. Are they rare because there's just not that many of them, or that's a different story. So,
Right. Exactly.
well, so I wasn't sure about what the new research was going to show. With basically just one place in the world that really being researched, but there's actually some interesting things. So the first I'm going to touch on since we're not that far off from when you're talking about the acoustics. This is the first report of a pygmy killer whale in Cuba.
Ooh,
Yeah.
interesting.
This is by Alvarez Alman et al. And there's only 10 published records in the Caribbean Sea, and the one record that I talked about before in the Greater Antilles, and there's no records in Cuba, so this is kind of a big deal. On September 6, 2016, two male individuals were shown up in shallow water, so like 1.6 meters. So that's not,
Super shallow.
yeah, they're not generally doing that. Lying unresponsive, and I learned a new word, akinsia, Akinesa.
Oh, like kinesthesia, kind of. So it's
Kinesthesia,
like to do with
but
movement. Okay.
akinsia. So A means without. So this means the inability to voluntarily move one's muscles and limbs.
Wow.
Right. So they were basically they were floating in the water, and the fishermen came over and like helps keep them afloat. Or like stood next to them. They were breathing just fine, but like seemingly just couldn't move.
Oh, wow.
And it's almost like they were in shock, but they were still breathing. And this apparently this kinesia can happen after acoustic stress.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is that the fishermen stayed with them. Then people came into the water and took pictures and to touch them and look at them and whatnot. The animals did not try to swim away. They were just like logs basically. Vets came to look, but there was no rehab facility. So they have an aquarium there, but they only had bottlenose dolphins there, and they had no quarantine tanks, so they couldn't just throw them in there and risk the bottlenose dolphins getting sick. So they had to release them the same day. The body condition was very good. There were no outward signs of injury or disease or anything, so they looked seemingly fine. They just couldn't move.
They were just kind of stunned almost.
Yeah, no, exactly. So they basically took them on a truck and then took them on a boat, put them out where there was over 200 meters depth, and during that time they started to become more alert. And then once they dove, they put them in the water. Both dove very quickly after being released. One immediately, and then one shortly after. And although their fate is unknown, there was no stranding record in the following days. So hopefully they survived. So again, the reason for the stranding is unknown, but because of the good condition of the animals and the behavior that they had, they are leaning towards the fact that they were stunned by some kind of potential Navy sonar or seismic activity or something that basically shocked them.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy, right?
That's fascinating.
So and I had not heard of really talking about that, like that kind of thing. Like usually they strand on the beach, right? They were not beach. They were floating and just couldn't move.
Well, and it's interesting because it's a different behavior. So usually the stranding is in relation to like a flight response potentially is what they kind of, they're getting away from the noise where these guys sound like it was so shocking that like you just can't, you're just knocked senseless kind of almost where you can't move.
And
wow.
Then the current just brought them in, I guess, or I don't really know.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So that was very interesting. Then another first sighting was off of Cabo Verde in the Atlantic African coast. Only previous was a mass stranding at Boa Vista in February 2012. And then one that was captured off of Senegal in 1958, and then a bycatch one in Ghana in 2007. So again, very rare, so unique occurrence. They saw them during a cetacean survey on September 10th, 2019. They saw 30 with two calves in 150-meter depth off Sao Felipe Fogo Island, approximately 1 kilometer from shore and 1 kilometer from 1,000 depth contour, 1,000 meter. So again, they're close to shore, but only because it was this giant drop off.
That shelf, yeah.
That was there. So cool that more people are citing these things. Then another one, actually I'm gonna skip to this one. this is by Poulos et al. 2018, and this is movement and dive patterns of pygmy killer whales released in Gulf of Mexico after rehab. So since we're talking about strandings and rehabilitation, there were 2 adult males that live stranded in 2015 in Mississippi in September and returned to the wild in July 2016 to the Gulf of Mexico. They were tagged with satellite linked and dive behavior tags to be able to see what happened. One transmitted for only 15 days, but the other one transmitted for 88 days. They started diving 2 to 4 days after release, so they probably had to get their bearings back from being more than 96% of the dives were at night. So again, that goes towards what we said earlier, that in Hawaii they dive more at night. So perhaps they do in general. So they're likely following prey that are those diel migrators. So they come up at night, so they're more shallow. In the daytime, they're too far to eat. The longest dive was more than 9 minutes, and the deepest was 368 meters. So fairly deep, 1,000 feet. More than 98% were over the shelf break between 200 to 1,200 meters deep. So they like deeper, but not too deep. You know, they can't dive that far. Both stayed in close proximity to each other, although not diving synchronously. But they still seem to stay close together, which again goes to those long-term associations. Perhaps these 2 guys were having a budding bachelor party or something and then got lost. Like, man, this is a crazy trip, dude. The longer the 88-day tag, I guess there's a qualification of what constitutes a successful release in how long it is. So 6 weeks looks like it's the apparent time frame. So they said that this was a case of successful release with the tag had a greater than 6 weeks survival after being released. The other tag fell off at 15 days, so they don't know what happened there.
Gotcha.
So, interesting though that they were in captivity for about 9 months, from like September to July. So
wow,
they were able to rehab them and get them back out, which was great.
That's awesome. Yeah.
The next one was interesting. Another stranding. This is Curie et al. 2021, rapid weight loss in free-ranging pygmy killer whales, which is a little not totally correct because they were looking at stranded individuals, but they were free-ranging, right? And
okay, interesting.
Yeah, so they're not actually
confusing wording.
Free-ranging animals at the moment. They were free-ranging, and then they stranded, and then they used this technology. So it's true, but slightly off.
Some clarifiers needed.
Yeah, exactly. They used basically UASs on occupied aerial systems, basically doing photogrammetry. So taking measurements of the animal from an unmanned aerial, like drone, basically a drone. I should just say that, it's a lot easier. But they can take measurements, and then you can try to do the health of a population. So that's what they do with killer whales out here. Right? And gray whales, they take pictures, and then they can tell you, oh, this animal's doing great, it's not great, it's fat, it's skinny, it's pregnant, whatever. So it's really helpful to have in free-ranging cetaceans to be able to do that. So what this was doing was calibrating if this was possible for pygmy killer whales. So they used the drone on the stranded individuals over a 21-day stranding event, which is a long time.
Oh, yeah.
So the stranded individuals were measured, and they showed that the length was within 1.5% of the real, they could actually measure the animals, right? So they're able to ground truth. So they literally measured the animals, and then they used the drone and did the photogrammetry to see if they matched. And then the volume was within 10 to 13%. So pretty close of what the animals actually length was and weight. And so basically it's showing that this can be used for free-ranging ones if they ever found them out in the open ocean. But they also showed that the foraging disruption, so not eating for 21 days, they would have a daily decrease of 2% of their body mass per day.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah. And they can lose up to 27% in 17 days.
Wow. That's a quarter of your body. That's a quarter of your body weight.
Yeah. So again,
wow.
we kind of talked about similarity with porpoises. Again, it might be that they're smaller, they're in warmer waters, but maybe they just have a higher metabolism and they just can't last as long without food as other larger marine mammals.
Yeah.
So interesting, but it was cool because if people have drones, if a researcher has a drone out there and they manage to find these guys, might be able to use photogrammetry to get some help on the wild population. So that was cool.
Interesting.
That was a good example of a excellent way to use stranded individuals to help ones that are alive. Yeah, down the line. And then the last one I have is actually by someone we know, by Shelby Yan.
Oh, fun. I
Yes.
went to school with her.
Yep. And she almost came out here for a little while. And then she's been up in she's in Alaska now. So hers is a Shelby, it's a Yan et al. 2022. And it's sexually dimorphic characteristics of short-finned pilot, pygmy killer, melon-headed, and false killer whales using fin and body morphometrics. And I think we actually might have talked about this study before on one of the other ones, probably our false killer whale one, or maybe the short-finned pilot whale. Not sure which.
I think it might have been the false killer whale one, but yeah.
Yeah. But basically showing that, again, using this kind of, this isn't drones, but this is using photographs and being able to use relationships between height and width of the dorsal fins. They can use photographs that are not ground truthed to be able to say if there's differences between males and females in a species of their size of their dorsal fin and whatnot. So they found that males of all species had larger dorsal fins, proportion to the anterior body length. So bigger dorsal fins compared to the front half of the body. Pygmy killer whales showed subtle dimorphism in the lateral positioning of the topmost point and overhang. So very specific parts. She had a lot of different relationships that she was looking at between the dorsal fins. So this is like kind of like the top little part the males had, I think, more of an overhang than the females did, or something like that. I forgot to look in depth on that one, but there was a subtle difference between males and females for that. And so when they put it through a generalized linear models to see if they could predict, like if this particular picture of the animal was a male or female, it had moderate predictive accuracy for pygmy killer whales versus some of the other whales was a bit more strong. And so basically what it shows is that the adult pygmy killer whales have subtle sexual dimorphism. So it's there, but you're not really going to see it with your own eyes, but you could detect it using morphometrics. So if you use the program that she used, which was actually ImageJ, and would be able to measure the fin, you could predict if it was a male or female, or it could help you. It's a moderate.
Right. You might be able to make a better, more educated guess potentially.
Right. But it's not like, that's definitely a male. It'd be like, no, that's most likely a male based on these characteristics. So pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I think this species shows a lot of what can we do with technology that can help us understand these really enigmatic and rare.
Elusive. Yeah, they're elusive.
Elusive, enigmatic, rare. And hopefully they're rare because they're just rare. They're supposed to be, right? There's supposed to be not that many of them, or rare because of where they're distributed, not rare because there's just not a lot because of something bad happening to them or whatnot.
Right. And that is, again, like this is where we come back to, we've talked about this on so many different podcasts, but we are so limited as researchers, as a scientific community. We really are limited by our ability to get to these places. And when you have these animals who live in far-flung places or out in the open ocean over very deep water, it's just really challenging for us to be out there. So yeah, hopefully they are out there and there's plenty of them out there. We're just not seeing them versus there actually aren't that many.
Right. And maybe there's not that many and that's how it's supposed to be. I don't know, right? We don't know. Yeah. And that we may never know because there's no way to know what the population was previous to, whatever might have hurt them. But hopefully it's just that there are just fewer of them because they're supposed to be, and they're just cool and like to surprise us every once in a while by showing up and being like, hey, we're still alive.
Right. Hi, we're the 1%. Good to see you.
They're like the elusive species where it's just like every once in a while they'll show up just to keep your interest going. But then like, oh yeah, remember me? Yeah, oh that's right. Yeah. Start thinking about us now for a while, and then do that again. So anyway, that is the pygmy killer whale. Super cute. Again, if you're not watching on YouTube, be sure to look them up. They're with their cute little white lips and cute little bodies. So with that, we will let you guys go. Next episode, I don't know what it's going to be. Kat's leaving for a little while, so
I'm just going on vacation, guys. It's nowhere. It's nothing fancy.
But she's leaving me. No, she's going on vacation, so much deserved. So I will be figuring something out in the next week, but you'll just have to be surprised as whatever ends up happening.
Or if you have suggestions of what you would like us to talk about, and I say us, meaning the royal us, if what you would like Cindy to properly talk about for you for our next episode, definitely let us know. You can leave, if you're listening to this on Spotify, I believe you can now leave comments on there, or you can catch up with us on social media at Pacific Mammal Research, all one word. So be sure to let us know if you have a preference, if you'd like to hear something particular, or if you have any ideas. We'd love to hear from
Yeah, please give me an idea so I don't have to think of one myself.
you.
Either way, it'll be fun, whatever we do. And so with that, we will be back in a couple weeks. And don't forget to check out our website and our merch store. 10-year anniversary is coming up in October, so we'll be telling you more about that as we get closer. And thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
This was brought to you by Pacific Mammal Research, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. To learn more about the species we discuss, check out our blog. Head to our website, www.pacmam.org, that's PACMAM.org, to check it out. Also, help us continue providing fun and educational content like this by donating today. Your help is how we can continue to do our work and share it with you. Thanks.